need to be able to express themselves in clear English are being taught political slogans. Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay.
You are also the Minister for Equalities, and it is expected this week, after some time, that we will see the guidance for schools on how they should best support trans pupils, young people identifying as trans. Should teachers have to tell parents if children want to change their gender?
There is quite a lot of confusion about what the law says, and it is important that parents are aware of what's going on with their children and what's happening to them at school.
Is it possible, though, that we have a situation where trans pupils might feel that teachers are outing them to their parents, even against their wishes?
The fact is that this is not a trivial thing. This is very different from sexual orientation, and what is right is that parents know what is going on with their children at school. It is not for teachers to parent, it is for parents to parent, and we're giving guidance to make sure that everyone is getting the balance right.
The United Kingdom is in crisis. Inflation is rising. Brexit has been a disaster. Independence movements in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland threatened to leave England the sole country left under Westminster's control. We had 3 prime ministers last year. 3! And we'll likely have another one by the end of the year if the rumours are anything to go by. Throughout all of this, the background of coming out the other end of a global pandemic, broken and defeated. The country a shadow of its former self. The new sick man of Europe. Now, electricity bills are rising by thousands of pounds. Rents are rising, wages are falling, and more people are struggling to survive. Especially in the face of a crumbling NHS, starved of public money and on the brink of collapse. So, what solutions does our ever-vigilant government have for this crisis? How will Britain escape from this downward spiral? Universal basic income? Rent controls? Reinvestment in public services? Nationalising energy companies? Investing in renewables, maybe? Well, no. None of those things. This is the Conservative Party we're talking about. They're not interested in solutions. This is the world that they've been working towards. They've basically got everything that they've ever wanted. Or at least they will have, once they finally think they can fully privatise the NHS without inciting a revolution. In the ideology of the ruling party of the UK, and, as it stands now, the opposition party, almost the entirety of our press corps, and a good chunk of anyone with a voice on these cursed islands, there can be no deviation from Thatcherite economics. If the country is suffering, the answer cannot lie in the realm of investment or, God forbid, social programs. No, the only ideas left that haven't been enacted are those of the so-called culture wars. And, oh boy, do we have a lot of downwards left to spiral on that front, so faced with thousands angry, poor and starving, the solution our kid Rishi Sunak has come up with as a salve for this country is a new and somehow worse version of Margaret Thatcher's infamous Section 28. That is, a proposal to essentially eradicate trans people from public life and view, starting with schools. So, what the fuck? Why the fuck? And more importantly, what the fuck? Let's start with the history of this terrifying attack on the queer community, the original one, and go back to the last time the country was mercilessly destroyed by the Conservatives, and the time that we were dragged kicking and screaming from social democracy into a neoliberal hellscape, the one that we currently live in. What was Section 28, and why was Section 28? Part 1. Section 28.
In the House of Lords, a vote is taking place now on a challenge to the poll tax. Tory rebels have said that the tax is
protesting about rights for lesbian and gay people.
I can't stay sober if we're going to be talking about Thatcher, so let's turn this into a drinking game. Or between the Iron Lady and my home country announcing people like me need to go unalive ourselves, I'm going to end up unaliving myself. So take a drink every time I say Thatcher. And by the end, your bladder will be full enough to give her grave a thorough pissing on. Anyone who looks up the history of Section 28 will see echoes of similar laws passed in other countries. For example, you might remember Vladimir Putin's laws against the promotion of homosexuality in Russia in the recent past. That wording, the promotion of homosexuality, is almost word for word the wording used to describe the intent of Section 28. The current slew of anti-trans, anti-drag, and general anti-queer bills in the USA, such as Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, are a part of that same legacy, as are the recent Russian bills outlawing trans people, which basically mirrors their anti-gay laws. And this isn't just a coincidence. In a time of a resurgent LGBT rights movement, in the modern case the fight for trans equality, and in the 1980s, where this story began, the first major gains in the gay rights movement in the shadow of the horrors of the AIDS crisis, this counter-revolution to the ongoing queer revolution, the conservative backlash of the Republican Party in the US, the Conservative Party in the UK, and other regimes such as those of Putin, Duda, and Orban in Russia, Poland, and Hungary respectively, are driven by the rising visibility and social acceptability of queer people to crack down on the community before it gets too close to being accepted in the mainstream. And this is especially important to these wannabe dictators or actual dictators, as their legitimacy of power relies on them being in control of these conservative societies, that they are constantly terrified of spinning out of their control. They constantly need to rein this in and make sure any dissent is either eaten in it or completely eradicated. And just like people like Ron DeSantis are complicit in the ongoing trans genocide happening in the US and elsewhere, particularly in regards to the epidemic of murders of black trans women, Section 28 was part and parcel of the policy of gay genocide that Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were pursuing in the 1980s. In the wake of the AIDS crisis, the queer community needed help more than ever, and needed a voice to call for that help. Not only did their cries go unanswered despite the mass protests and riots, it was seen as a good thing by the godparents of neoliberal economics, Thatcher and Reagan, who saw homosexuality as inherently immoral, and who, knowingly, purposefully, allowed HIV to spread throughout the queer population. We lost an entire generation, probably more, to this genocide by neglect. This new law will, God willing, not come close to that body count, but the intent is the same. We have been warning of a trans genocide for years now, and the response to this from conservative parties in both the US and the UK? Cracking down on trans people, especially trans youth, a strategy that will inevitably lead to murders, such as that of British trans youth Brianna Gay, and suicide such as, well, go to any Transgender Day of Remembrance vigil in November, and you'll see why I'm not naming names here. The list is long, and to be honest, the murder list is as well. I'm just bringing up Brianna because she was a British trans youth murdered by her classmates, which is exactly the kind of thing this new proposition the government are putting forward will lead directly to more of. But don't get it twisted. For every white trans woman that is murdered, black trans women are in the most danger here. There are more of them being murdered all over the world, and we should not forget that. Section 28 itself was a law introduced in 1988, the culmination of a moral panic against the LGBT community, following increasing visibility of gay rights campaigners and the aforementioned AIDS crisis, and was used to continue a lot of Thatcher's economic agenda, as well as her social agenda. For example, the first domino to fall in the series of events that led to the passing of Section 28 was a report about a library book of all things, in which a little girl had gay parents. This library was run by the London Educational Authority, which was run by Labour, and at the time, the London political authorities were seen as a real thorn in Thatcher's side. It was seen as too radical, too socialist, and an excuse to demonise it was always welcome. The book in question, called Jenny Lives with Eric and Martin, was the cause of a massive hissy fit by Britain's reliably insane press corps, and eventually a private member's bill in the House of Lords, don't ask, entitled An Act to Refrain Local Authorities from Promoting Homosexuality. This was followed up by a similar in-spirit amendment to the 1988 local government bill by Tory MP David Wiltshire, named Clause 28, and despite the massive demonstrations by LGBT groups in response, including the largest ever held in the UK at the time, where 20,000 people took to the streets of Manchester, and a group of lesbians storming the set of the 6 o'clock news, this bill was enacted. It is now known as Section 28. Prohibition on promoting homosexuality by teaching or by publishing material. 1. A local authority shall not, A. intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality. B. Promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. 2. Nothing in subsection 1 above shall be taken to prohibit the doing of anything for the purpose of treating or preventing the spread of disease. 3. In any proceedings in connection with the application of this section, a court shall draw such inferences as to the intention of the local authority as may reasonably be drawn from the evidence before it. 4. In subsection 1b, above maintained schools means A. In England or Wales, a county school, voluntary school, nursery school, or special school. B. In Scotland, a public school, nursery school, or special school. This bill wasn't effectively repealed until 2003, when I was about 12 years old, so the entire time I was in primary school, this bill was active, banning gay propaganda, which, you might imagine, is pretty vague. This was on purpose. It encouraged paranoia and the widest possible interpretation of this bill's language, essentially. It made it impossible to mention even the existence of LGBT people in the education system at all, lest you cross that vague threshold. Until 2003. Imagine you're gay, like I am, or you have a gay sibling, or parent, or friend, and the mention of you, or the people close to you, is explicitly forbidden by law. Like, some of this language, the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. If you have gay parents, how is that supposed to read to you? If you have a relative who is dying from AIDS, at that point I can't even imagine. And if you really want to try and separate Thatcher from this, to try and turn her into some sort of girl boss, like Nicki Minaj apparently wants to, which she herself would have hated, by the way, she was very anti-feminist, you do well to remember her speech the year before this passed, at the 1987 Conservative Party conference. Children who need to be taught to respect traditional moral values are being taught that they have an inalienable right to be gay, she said. All of those children are being cheated of a sound start in life. Yes, cheated. And what's more, this was explicitly part of their programme. Section 28 was introduced following a difficult period for the LGBT plus community in the UK. There had been some progress, but the outbreak of HIV/AIDS led to the widespread demonisation of gay and bisexual men in the 1980s. The Conservative Party capitalised on this anti-gay sentiment in the run to the 1987 general election. They issued posters claiming that the Labour Party wanted LGBT-friendly books like Young, Gay and Proud and The Milkman's on His Way to be read in schools. I wish The Milkman was on his way. And just in case you thought that the lack of education on the existence of gay people would prevent gay kids from getting bullied, well, I have some news for you. I won't spend long on my own experiences in this, because I went to Catholic school, and so I can't really separate that from Section 28. I don't know how much the Catholic stuff actually interfered with it. But I was relentlessly bullied in school, and one of the reasons was because everyone thought I was gay. Turns out I was, not in the way that they thought, because I'm transgender. But the thing is the same. The teachers cannot interfere. The teachers cannot tell them that's a bad thing to make fun of someone for being gay. The teachers could not promote the idea that being gay was okay. If you were being bullied for being gay at school until I was literally 12 years old, the teachers were forbidden from condemning that. And I'm a younger millennial. There are people out there, older millennials, for example, who this was their entire school life. I didn't hear a mention of anything related to gay stuff in school until I was in a religious education class in, I think I was 15, and it was mentioned as a possible arrangement for families, which is very progressive, and our RE teacher was very progressive, but it was also introduced with the concept that you might be very familiar with in Christianity: hate the sin, not the sinner. So it is a sin to be gay, but you can be gay, but you'd be a sinner. Other instances are much more clear-cut, and people's experiences on this have been recorded. One such case follows. Craig was bullied a lot in secondary school because he was gay. There was only one member of staff who ever spoke to me about it, my drama teacher, he said. And I wasn't aware at the time that she could have gotten into trouble for just doing that. Craig, who grew up near Aberdeen, is one of many LGBT plus people who came of age during the era of Section 28, a law passed in 1988 by a Conservative government that stopped councils and schools promoting the teaching of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. You may have heard the term Section 28 when it was discussed on RuPaul's Drag Race UK. School was hard, contestant Davina De Campo explained, before breaking into tears in yesterday's episode for the reality show. I got a lot of flack from pretty much everybody in school. Growing up for everybody was hard, but then you add on being gay, and it was just a whole other level, particularly for the time that I grew up. Kids on the playground pushing and shoving you and calling you a fag, throwing their drinks on you. Because of Section 28, it meant that a lot of teachers felt like they couldn't step in. The teachers felt like they couldn't talk about it, Nothing was said about gay people at all. Craig, who went to school in North East Scotland and now teaches English at a school in East London, adds, Section 28 put me at a lot of risk because I didn't get sex education that was relevant to me. I didn't get any advice about what a healthy relationship looked like. I had no models. As soon as I turned 16 and started going out to gay clubs, I developed worrying behaviour that put me in danger, like excessive alcohol abuse and sex with much older men. I now know as a teacher that we have a duty of care over young people to educate them. No one stepped in to help me back then, and I feel a bit angry about that to this day. Craig, who came out to a friend when he was 14, adds, Section 28 led to so many insecurities around how I looked, how I behaved, how I carried myself. I became very paranoid about how people perceived me. Growing up, I didn't know what it meant to be gay. I just knew that it was wrong. It was something to be ashamed of. If you're not British, and this has changed your image of Thatcher, there's a reason we all hate her, right? I mean, there's lots of reasons. There's the foreign policy, there's the domestic stuff, there's the way that she wrecked the economy, got rid of our social democracy, got rid of all the safety net, punished queer people. The list goes on. This wasn't bloody shown in The Crown, was it? Well, imagine what else they left out. There's a reason when her name is mentioned, I feel the lapsed Catholic in me urging me to do the sign of the cross. She is the devil, and thankfully, she is in hell now. So, now we know what the original Section 28 was. Let's look at Rishi Sunak's Tribute Act. Section 22.2, Transphobic Boogaloo.
I'm a coke addict. Total coke addict.
Part 2, the new Section 28. This bit, so if you've been playing along with the drinking game, this is the bit that's going to be lighter because we're in the modern day. If you really want to carry on, and I don't recommend you do, safe alcohol consumption, everything in moderation. If I say Sunak, you can drink, I suppose. On the 18th of June, 2023, The Sun, famous newspaper for dickheads, received a leaked report, I suspect from the government itself, on new anti-trans school laws to be put forward by the Prime Minister and only living man shorter than a P, Rishi Sunak, which many have been comparing to Section 28, either calling it the new Section 28, pointing out that in some respects it will be worse, and just generally, trans people, we're out here being the canaries in the coal mine. British fascism just keeps descending upon us, and we're just its most notorious target. When we tell you it's coming, you should bloody listen. These intentions were confirmed just this week at the time of recording this by Kemi Badenoch, Women and Equality Secretary, I believe, and so it looks like the government got what it wanted. It leaked the reports, all the right people got angry, all the right people applauded it, so this is the audience they're chasing. We are all in trouble. Yay! But remember that while Section 28 basically banned teaching about gay people, banned teachers from being able to take a stance on that, which led it to basically being okay to bully gay people, and a whole bunch of other stuff as a result of the law's vagary, there are some pretty concrete effects of this new proposed legislation that would immediately and materially make trans kids' lives hell. And if you're savvy about British politics, you'll recognise these policies immediately as coming from a certain 55 Tufton Street and the hateful think tanks there, who were open and calling for these measures not too long ago. We'll go back to that. For now, I suppose I'm going to have to quote The Sun? This feels wrong. Listen, it's The Scum, okay? Famous newspaper for dickheads, as I already said. I lived in Liverpool for years. I'm never going to stop hating The Sun. You know, justice for the victims of Hillsborough. Fuck Murdoch. Fuck The Sun. Starmer. Scab. For going to The Sun. But this is where the government shoved the shit. So unfortunately, I am going straight to the source here. Schools will be banned from letting kids change the gender if the parents say no, The Sun can reveal. And children who want to be called by another pronoun, he, she, they, will not be able to take part in competitive sport under new government guidance to be published this week. The Prime Minister has also expressed huge concerns over the content of sex education being taught to some pupils, where teachers are refusing to hand over the curriculum to worried parents. In a move which will be seen as the PM taking on militant trans campaigners, that's me, I'm militant trans campaigners, teachers will be forced to tell parents their child is questioning their gender, even if the child objects. The new guidance is set to spark a fiery backlash from the trans lobby. That's me, I'm the trans lobby as well as the militant trans campaigners. I'm both. Don't worry about it. And other campaigners who will argue it's up to the children themselves to tell the parents they want to change gender. Under the new plans, heads in England will be told that parents must always be consulted if a child wants to be called another name or wear a different gender uniform, and the school will not be able to use the child's new preferred pronouns until parents give consent. So much for free speech, hey? Teachers will be ordered not to recognise a transition within the school gates if the parents do not agree with it, and neither students nor teachers will have to call another pupil by their preferred pronouns if they do not want to. Legalising bullying again. Yes, good, great, amazing. Even if parents do give the move the green light, heads must also consider the mental effects on other children before approving the gender change, following a long period of consideration. Schools will be ordered to take a precautionary approach to transitioning kids, and will be urged to keep an eye on them in the first instance. But critics have warned the new rules may put kids at risk of harm. Teaching unions say they are dealing with a minefield around issues of gender, while trying not to offend anyone. But the new rules say that if there is a significant safeguarding issue where kids may be put at harm, schools must always act to protect them. Does that not kind of negate the rest of it? Anyway. The PM will also insist that sport should be protected for children in the name of safety and to keep it fair. Where a child is questioning their gender, they should not be allowed to play competitive sport. Famously, it's very unsafe to allow transsexuals to compete in competitive sport. Like, if I go on a football field, I just explode. And not because I'm trans, just because I hate it. A government source told The Sun, parents have got to be kept in the know about their child while they are at school and should be consulted when sensitive matters arise. If their child expresses a desire to transition, for example, it's vitally important that parents are made aware and have a say. It is in everyone's best interest to ensure this happens, so that the child is looked after, teachers are clear in how they must handle the situation, and parents know so that they can handle it appropriately and sensitively. The guidance will be crystal clear on all fronts. The PM has repeatedly insisted that he wants to protect children in schools as well as parents' rights. The Policy Exchange think tank, big red flags, found a number of schools were routinely disregarding advice around transgender pupils and were not telling parents of their child's decisions. Just 39 of them reliably informed parents when pupils identified as trans or questioned their gender, but 87 schools did not. By the way, if you know anything about educational safeguarding, they're not supposed to. Those 39 schools were the ones that actually followed the regulations and the law. The PM had promised the review by summer term, so teachers, parents, and pupils can have their say on the rules in the coming weeks. It will also consider how to teach kids age-appropriate sex education after disturbing content was revealed to be being taught to young children. Reports show kids as young as 10 were being taught about pornography. This is a US conservative imported fake story. A new independent expert review will recommend specific age ratings on content. Only high-quality teaching materials from approved providers will be allowed to be used. Sensitive topics, such as gender, will not be presented as facts to children, with discussion encouraged. MPs have sounded the alarm about how parents are being kept in the dark about graphic lessons on oral sex, how to choke your partner safely, and 72 genders. Again, that is a lie. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan has already written to all head teachers demanding they share curriculum matters with parents. The PM, himself a dad of 2 girls, has previously said that he was very concerned about reports into sex education classes and gender. The long-awaited guidance is expected to come this week, but will undergo a lengthy period of consultation before coming to effect by the end of this year. Mr. Sunak told yesterday's Sun on Sunday, "The well-being and safety of children is my top priority." That's my Sunak impression. "We have to recognise that any degree of social transition could have potentially quite significant impact and consequences for a child. So it is vital the right safeguards are in place." The PM has tried to draw a dividing line between the Tories, Labour and the Lib Dems over these issues. Mr. Sunak has repeatedly insisted no woman can have a penis, whereas Lib Dem boss Ed Davey has said, of course some do. Keir Starmer has repeatedly tried to dodge the question. Recently he has said only 1 in 1,000 women have one. The PM was last night revealed to have been caught on camera joking about the differences between the parties in these issues. In footage obtained by Pink News, he said at a recent 1922 meeting of Tory backbenchers, get ready for Sunak's stand-up routine everyone, "You'll all know that I'm a big fan of everybody studying maths to 18, but it turns out that we need to focus on biology." What a great joke. So, this will kill people. This will kill children. And this is the government's priority as the UK is in a death spiral of crises, all caused by a lack of government funding for essential institutions combined with a global financial crisis. There are urgent things that need doing to save this country. And this does the opposite. This is a hateful, genocidal bill that will lead to murders and suicides of children. And fundamentally, this will pass unopposed by both the British press and the opposition parties in Parliament. In a horrible sense, if this is put forward, and it looks very much like it will, especially after the Kemi Badenoch announcement, this is an inevitability. An open war on trans kids in the UK. a bipartisan, uncriticised by the press, clampdown on some of the most vulnerable people in society. You know, sometimes I wonder if I made the right decision in leaving the UK, but I don't know how I'll cope with this. I'm barely handling it now, and I'm in a different bloody country. This will kill people. This will kill children. Like, Section 28 was horrible. It was a gagging order on queerness in the education system, and its scars are still felt to this day. To know that, and to do it again regardless, but with more hands-on cruelty? It's just that, it's just cruel. Cruelty for the sake of cruelty. Even if you exclude the trans element from this, which is the entirety of this proposition's intent, having to get permission from parents to wear trousers? This is even a step back for girls in general, as these commitments to old-school gender norms always will be. Any clampdowns on gender expression by necessity reinforce draconian measures designed to rob women of agency and to teach men to view them as property. And this is in school? And they call us groomers? And it's not just that. Making it explicit that pupils and teachers will be protected if they misgender or dead-name trans kids is giving a government green light to transphobic bullying and harassment. And as we saw in the case of the original Section 28, this will be the result regardless. This proposal by the government is actively promoting bullying, actively encouraging cruelty to children, and is sure to cause an entire generation or more a buttload of trauma, if not much worse. And speaking of much worse, this whole thing resting on parents' permission is as predictable as it is evil. When conservatives prattle on and on about traditional family values, this implies the dynamics of not only the typical husband, wife, and 2.5 kids, but the idea of children as the property of their parents. That the final say on a child's well-being, health, and freedom does not come from the child itself, but from the parent, no matter what the consequences of those dynamics are. Now, if you have lovely parents, I'm sure this doesn't seem like much of a problem for you. But queer children have a much higher rate of rejection from their parents. And this is what the Conservative Party and their outriders are betting on. The idea is that trans kids will be prevented from transitioning by the Tories' base, transphobic boomers and the occasional Gen Xer, which is already a pretty outdated view given the current cohort of kids starting school are the children of millennials, who the government still thinks of as babies even though we're in our 30s and 40s at this point. Anyway, this assumes that being trans is a choice, or at least something that can be suppressed. As if the shame of being rejected by your parents and having that rejection enforced by your school and by wider society will make you stop being trans. More likely than this suppressing people's transness, this will lead to children coming out as adults after years of trauma and depression and bullying, like me. Or the school system will once again have blood on its hands. ¿Por qué no los dos? I think people celebrating these measures either massively underestimate the amount of people that would be driven to unaliven themselves over this, or, and this is somehow scarier, they know, and they don't care. Some of them might even think that it's a good thing. They certainly act like they're pro-people they don't like the look of dying when they double down on welfare policies that actively unalive disabled people. And the Tory response to the coronavirus pandemic was basically, just let all your grandparents and all disabled people die for the economy. Honestly, if statistics came out proving that these policies would lead to mass harm, that would probably only make them more likely to push through with it. Their politics are not based on efficacy or fairness, as they'd like you to believe. They're based on fear, disgust, and greed. These laws, if and when they are passed, will kill people, children no less, and that's part of the plan. Because once children come out as trans, they are no longer seen as human by these people, and keeping them alive is no longer in the interests of the ruling class. And all of this isn't even happening because of some outbreak of transgender ideology or some breakthrough in recognition either. It's happening because the Tories have no more ideas. They got everything they wanted, and they're still miserable. The economy is a capitalist hellscape fresh from Thatcher's wet dreams, and it's shit. But their ideology is so firmly entrenched that they cannot fathom why things are still bad when they did everything they thought was right. So they're reaching for the nearest scapegoats they can find. And in Britain, where trans people are still an acceptable target across the entire political sphere, they know that if they come after us, there will be no opposition. Their hope is people will react like they're actually doing something, when really, they're just finding new people to torture while they wait for the economy to magically heal on its own. when what the people really need is some fucking help. Help that will never come with this current shower of bastards leading the charge. And in typical British fashion, this isn't even their idea. This is straight out of the infamous 55 Tufton Street, a building which is the home to a bunch of far-right think tanks, and which has been dictating policy as if they were the ones that got voted into Parliament, rather than a bunch of posh twats swimming in dark money, ignoring the material conditions of the degrading country around them, and coming up with new and twisted ways to sell the public on the idea of killing the poor. As well as coming up with policies like the ones Rishi Sunak is proudly presenting to, of all things, The Sun, a month or so before they announce his government plans, they're a hub of climate denial, ties to American evangelical and fascist groups, anti-immigration ideology, anti-woke groups, whatever that means, and are just down the road from the Institute of Economic Affairs, which you might remember as basically handing Liz Truss a list of things they'd like to do, which she promptly did, and which instantly crashed the entire economy, an incident from which Britain still hasn't recovered. And that's not even mentioning them housing the LGBT Alliance, which might well be the most notorious anti-trans hate group in the country. Clearly this is a very unbiased source from which the government will undoubtedly find new and innovative ways to concentrate all trans people in some sort of collection of tents. What do you call that? A camp? That sounds fun, right? Camps? Camps are great. Well, while Britain remains the sick man of Europe, expect more of this. There certainly isn't an opposition making a case for doing things differently. Quite the opposite. As far as mainstream coverage would have you believe, since Corbyn was ousted from the Labour leadership, there's no possible other way to run this country than austerity, sneering at the poor, and making sure the transes all go back in the closet from whence they came. And if we don't have a closet to go back into, then to hell with it. A coffin will do. That's like a closet, isn't it? As long as we're not out in the sun, where they can see us, where they have to reckon with the fact that we exist. Part 3. And then they came for me. I'm sure by now there are some of you, hate watchers mainly, that are wondering why this is such a big deal. This is just about trans kids. Once you turn 18, if you still feel like you're a trans person, then you can transition, right? Well, every adult was once a trans kid. And the desistance rate of trans people is literally less than 1%. But just for the sake of argument, let's take you at your word that you genuinely don't care what people do with their bodies once they turn the arbitrary age of 18 and are now magically able to make decisions. Okay? So, are you okay with the plans the UK has for trans adults? Because they're going to be just as bad. On the 12th of July 2023, Ben Hunt for Vice published news of a leaked report for the government, made for civil servants, the people who do the daily business of government, which was due to be published within weeks. The proposals would ban trans staff from using single-sex spaces, so forcing them not to use the toilet, which, where are they supposed to pee, guys? Oh, that's right. It's not meant to stop people using the wrong bathroom. It's meant to stop trans people existing in the halls of government. They will be physically unable to use the space. Nice. Cool, amazing, great. Love my country. Senior civil servants told Vice News that they are terrified by the proposed plans, so clearly this is going against the wishes of even the highest levels of civil service staff. This is not a niche fear. This goes all the way from the bottom to the top. From the article itself. The document outlines proposed changes to the UK Civil Service's gender identity and intersex policies. There are around 500,000 UK civil service employees. The new policy states civil servants should equally recognise gender-critical beliefs and gender identity beliefs, meaning that employees can openly share controversial views on trans lives without being penalised. Responding to this policy, a trans civil servant who did not want to be identified in fear of losing their job told Vice News, "My existence is not a belief. How can my safety be just as important as someone's belief that I shouldn't be safe? This feels like it was written by someone gender-critical, just to give transfers more clout." The leaked document also proposed changes on access to toilets, so that only trans people with a gender recognition certificate can use single-sex facilities. Last year, Vice News first reported that the single-sex spaces could be restricted to those with GRCs, even though they are currently held by as little as 1% of trans people in the country. The new leaked document appears to confirm the UK government's rollout of that plan, and the staff member said this left them speechless. The leaked bathroom policy shows a complete switch from previous civil servants' guidance, which said that trans employees could use any toilet they wanted to. It said that the civil servants are free to have a flexible gender expression and to use any appropriate single-sex toilets and other facilities. The leaked document defines being trans as holding a gender identity belief, while a gender-critical belief is the label for people with anti-trans views. Defining gender-critical belief, the document states, a belief that recognises women only as adult human females and men only as adult human males, and that it's impossible to change sex, which is determined at conception. In a training session which took place last year, civil servants were told how using the phrase adult human female to define a woman could be seen as transphobic. Another civil servant, who is not trans, called the plans terrifying, telling Vice News, I'm shaken by all of this, and I know trans civil servants are too. How are transphobic views so mainstream now? They added that the document will validate gender-critical views and push LGBTQ rights back even further, saying, I'm a middle-aged cisgender gay man who has seen all this before. It sucked growing up with this level of hate in the 80s and 90s, and it's scary that the UK is becoming increasingly hostile to queer people. Responding to this story, Robbie DeSantos, Stonewall's Director of External Affairs, said, this leaked guidance contains many exclusionary and reprehensible suggestions that, combined, would effectively make it impossible for trans people to work in the civil service. Not only would this guidance be unworkable in practice, but it would be unlikely to stand up to legal challenge, as it brazenly ignores the long-established rules around single-sex spaces as outlined in the UK's World-Class Equality Act. Everyone should have the same opportunity to thrive in the workplace, but these guidelines would only serve to promote bullying and exclusion of trans people, a group who already experience diminished career prospects. Let me make this as clear as possible. This has nothing to do with protecting kids. This is an adult-only environment, a workplace, for the government, no less. There are no 6-year-olds running around implementing policy. This is purely an act of cruelty towards trans adults, and would essentially act as a ban on anyone trans working in government. If you were outraged by Trump banning trans people from the military during his presidency, this is worse. Like, much worse. Trans people don't get our bladders removed when we start hormone therapy. This is a ban wrapped in a technicality, and we should understand it as such. If you agree that this is the right thing to do, then spare me the lies about just wanting to protect kids. This is a war against a marginalized group, with no child in sight. Once you understand that, look back at the guidance being put out for kids in a new light. What if this wasn't about protecting kids? What if this was about eradicating an entire group of people from society? What word would you use to describe that? Because there is one. Because there is one very specific word for that. And I think you know what it is. And if you're one of those people who spent hours arguing with trans people online about how we're not oppressed actually, you'll have heard us use it for the attacks against us. Because it's an accurate description of the UK's plans. This country wants us gone, and it's willing to go to extreme measures to flush us out. We may not be swinging from a tree right now, but that's not how this stuff starts. That's the end point. And if you don't spot what's happening before it reaches that stage, you will lose your opportunity to stop it. Stand with us now, while you still can, and save yourself the trouble of knowing you could have saved us. But you stood back, because you thought we were being overdramatic. And for my trans viewers, hi. I hope you're okay. I love you. Stay safe. Remember that, for now, these laws have not been passed. Some of them haven't even been proposed. Just floated. I might be wrong that they're inevitable. Maybe they'll get pushed by the wayside or get shut down. I doubt it, but it's possible. And now more than ever, we have to have hope. Even if these laws do pass, we will still be here. We won't stop fighting. And we will force those Etonian twats to eat their words, and to tear that bill up into a million pieces. We cannot stand for this. And unlike when Section 28 was passed, this time the public is on our side. Gay issues were seen as fringe in the 80s. A majority of people still thought of homosexuality negatively. The same was not true for trans issues today. Maybe among the colonists who the government is constantly trying to appease, among billionaires and big business owners and inbred aristocrats, but on the streets, a lot of people know a trans person, and they know they're not so bad. And if not, they more than likely don't care. They're not up all night worrying that trans people are more comfortable coming out than they were 10 years ago. They're up all night worrying about whether they're going to be able to pay their electricity bill, whether they can afford rent this month. Hell, whether we're all going to die in an inferno because we're not acting on climate change quick enough. This scapegoating will not work. And we need to remember that. Thank fucking God, we have the people on our side. We have only to mobilise them into action. So stay safe out there. If you live in Britain, make sure you have a strong support network and that you have a backup plan. It's only going to get weirder from here. Thank you for being here, and I hope you stay safe, happy, and strong. Remember, you deserve to live. And you deserve to not have to live in fear, but to be able to thrive. To live without fear, without shame, without constantly having to look over your shoulder. I hope you can. Now. If not, then one day, in the future, once these horrors have passed. As all horrors have, eventually. Until then, thanks for watching. Britain. You know, it is very hot over here, but we're about 10 years behind the current culture war in the UK, so in about 10 years, I'll be back here saying the country where I'm currently living is facing the same thing. In the meantime, I'm gonna stand with you in my home country. So, in the meantime, I said that quite a few times. Hey, thank you for watching, and thank you for everyone who helped me get away from turf after all that, and everyone who continues to support me here, whether through individual donations or via my Patreon. It really helps. Actually, right now, it's been a long time since I've had a source of income that wasn't this, so I'm very, very thankful to all of my patrons. They're literally the only reason I can be alive right now and be able to afford food, and I would really appreciate it if you would join them. I'm hoping to be able to pay my grocery bill with this at some point in the next few months, otherwise I will be in trouble. So, no pressure, but if you have a couple of quid to spare, it does start from £1 a month. And that's not a lot. And if you can't donate to me on Patreon, because even £1 going out a month is a bit much, which I understand, we've all been there, and I'm kind of there right now. There's always coffee, and there's always PayPal, actually, if you want to donate to me on PayPal. That's catherinestrickson@gmail.com. Otherwise, the links are in the description and on screen right now. And if you sign up to my Patreon, you will get access to the Discord server when it's up, but in the meantime, you will be able to get access to my exclusive interviews with Princess Weeks and Rosenkreutz, as well as early access to all of my videos. And I'll read your name out at the end of each video if you want. I mean, I'll read it out anyway, unless you say you don't want it, and in which case I won't read it out. And if you really want, I'll read it in a stupid voice, because that's the way we go around here. I like doing voices. That's one of the things I like. In the meantime, these are the wonderful people who've been supporting me this month. Octopus9, Artie Wolf, Hayden Gaylor, Greg Noble, No Kings, Only Fools, H, Deanna McMillan, Caroline Regalado, Jenny Linsky, Alexandra Lilly, Jay Peterson, Anne Becerra, Howard Lott, Laura Van Loon, Scarjan, and Joey Cobalt. Guys, thank you so much for supporting me. I love you, I appreciate you, you literally all that's keeping me going. Ah, Jesus, it's hot in here. Anyone who wants to join them, please do. I'll have stuff coming, more exclusive videos for you, more early videos for you every single fucking week, unless I take a week off, which I occasionally do, but usually it'll be every week. And yeah, exclusive videos, Discord soon, we can chat. If you ever want to ask me a question, maybe I'll make a Q&A. Maybe I'll make a Q&A. Yeah, why not? I'll make a Q&A. If you start putting your questions down, I'll prepare for a Q&A special for when I hit 2k subs, which looks like it might be coming before the end of this year, so get your questions in while you still can. Alright, see you next time. Love you. Oh. Okay. It's incredibly hot. Everyone back in Britain who keeps saying, oh, it's fucking raining. It's not everywhere. Doesn't mean climate change isn't real. Fucking idiots. I can like barely wear any clothes. I turn my fan off for this. Look, this is my fan. I'm gonna move it just for you guys. That's how much I love you. And we'll be lucky if my wig stays on because it's so hot. It's actually coming apart. We'll be extremely lucky. Let's take the advice, right-wing advice. Sit up straight with your shoulders back. Clean your room. Okay. The United Kingdom is in crisis. Thank you, Carl. To bake in the sun. I will cook until I am done. I am a cake